my name is Christiana Spanegelfrey, and I was born here in Hartford in 1851. My parents were very early settlers in town, and they had 11 children. Two of the children died very, very young. They were babies at the time. So there were only 9 of us left, and unfortunately, there was a scarlet fever epidemic. 7 of my brothers and sisters died within 2 weeks of each other, leaving only my brother Louis and me.
That happens.
Yeah, that had to have been very tough for my parents. And we decided as a family to move to Waupun, where my parents worked in a hotel. And it's in Waupun that I met my future husband, Adam. Adam is from Bavaria, Germany. He was born there in 1842, and he emigrated to the U.S. when he was only 15 years old. He and his older sister, who was 17 at the time, came alone. The rest of his family did not come to the U.S. until 1864. They landed in New York, but then immediately came to Hartford. Why Hartford? Because they had an uncle who had a farm outside of town. His name was Philip Fry. After working on the farm for about 2 years, Adam decided that he was going to become a store clerk, and he moved to Schleisingerville, which is today Slinger, yes, and worked in the store of John Pick until about 1869. At some point during that time, he fought in the Civil War, but I don't have much information about where or what rank he held, what he did. In 1869, he moved to Waupun to clerk in a different store, and that's where we met. We were married in September of 1870, and we went on to have 8 children together. But we didn't remain in Waupun for very long. We moved back to Hartford in 1871, when Adam decided to open a store with a man named Fred Getz. Fred and Adam had a store that sold general merchandise, they had a grain elevator, and they sold farm produce. And it was called Adam Fry and Company because Adam was the senior partner. The store did quite well. Adam was a good businessman. They had 100,000 bushels of grain that went through their elevator every year, and he had roughly $14,000 worth of stock of merchandise in his store at any time. That doesn't sound like much, but today that's worth about $300,000. And you imagine a town Hartford size in the 1870s and 1880s, that's a lot of merchandise. He was a prosperous businessman. He was also a member of several organizations. He was a Turner. He was a member of the Sons of Herman, which was this German mutual aid society only for immigrants. He was an Odd Fellow, which is another fraternal organization. And if you look at his tombstone behind me, you see the urn inside the 4 pillars, and the urn indicates the high status that he had within his lodge. He was also a member of the local hook and ladder company, and he was elected as Hartford's mayor unanimously in 1888, a position which he held until his death in early 1889. He had been working at his store and left the store at around 2 o'clock that afternoon to head to his elevators. He knew that a shipment was going to be prepared to be sent out via train, and so he was inspecting what was going on. There were a couple of train cars on a spur being loaded with grain, and at some point, another engine with other cars was coming in to attach more cars to that train and came in a little bit too fast and bumped the cars that were being loaded. It broke the grain spout on one of the cars being loaded, and Adam was afraid that those cars had jumped the end of the track, which was a mess to deal with when you had to realign train cars. So he jumped out onto the main line to figure out what was going on, what could he do, could he fix the problem, and was so absorbed that he didn't hear the oncoming train and got hit. Although his body was thrown clear of the tracks, his left arm and leg were run over by a train and were nearly cut off. There was a sleigh nearby, so the men loaded him onto the sleigh, brought him home, and we called for Dr. Rogers, who's over there. Dr. Rogers called on a couple of his surgeon friends in Milwaukee for a second opinion, and they came by a special train at 7 o'clock that night. After examining Adam, they decided that there was absolutely nothing that they could do, that his wounds were fatal, and so he died later that night at about 10 o'clock. After he died, I had to start working in the store. I had to support all of my 8 children, and it was tough. I leaned on my eldest son, John, who was only about 15 at the time, to help me run the store. And unfortunately, John passed away at only 17 of diphtheria. His brother Grover likes to tell a story about the night before he died, his dog, a black lab, went crazy. The dog was howling and crying, and nothing could console the dog. The next morning, John died, and the dog ran away, and we could never find it again despite searching. We buried John here with his father, and if the handout, I don't know who has it, if you look, Barb, on the back, if you look, there's a picture of what the tombstone looked like right after we buried John. Quite a difference from today. And you'll see in that picture the floral tributes from all of John's siblings. After John died, another of my sons, William, had to leave school at only 12 to help me run the store. And he was a huge help. I couldn't have done it without him. I also got help from my eldest child's husband, Adolf Lobenstein. Adolf Lobenstein was a competitor of mine. He had another store here in Hartford, but he still generously gave of his time and his assistance to help me survive. Without William and without Adolf, I know I would never have been able to feed my family. And in fact, all of my children look at Adolf as a second father. He was that much of an important man to our family. When Adam died, the whole town closed down. All of the businesses were draped in mourning. The flag was at half-mast on the hook and ladder company. 2,000 people tried to come to his funeral. So many we couldn't fit them all in the church, and we had to move to the town hall. After the sermons and the eulogies, we had a funeral procession to bring Adam here to Union Cemetery, which was nearly a mile long. He was in such high regard in his community. So I'm hoping that by sharing Adam's story that I can keep his memory alive just that much longer. So, thank you. And so I forget who I told what, but I learned later, I've done Adam a couple